Journalist of Brazil, Book 2, Life After Health, Chapter 63, Facing the Stress Alone. Moraes was seething with anger, because it was obviously, for him, that I had given the night before someone else what he did not and would never get. He searched for trouble. It was becoming too stupid for me, so the invitation of Julia came just right. I left the house again to meet with Julia. Sitting with pretzels and Coke in the El Dorado shopping center, we finally had time to talk again. Julia expressed her concern that it could be dangerous for me. A jealous Brazilian can be unpredictable, she warned me, especially since I was taking it pretty much to the top. But I laughed. If anyone lives dangerous, then it is him. I must watch myself that I'm not eventually wring his neck. Since it was becoming late, I went home with Julia, thus spent the third night outside the apartment. This was too much for Moraes. The next day he moved out. The relationship with my landlady Vera was contrary to my expectation, yet much better than before. I was sure now she had never really liked Moraes. Donna Vera and her sister brought me coffee every day now, although I also prepared my own. They supplied me with fruits, sometimes even with lunch. Now, at last, I had the necessary peace to finish my first book and prepare the divulgation before the German businessman came to Sao Paulo. All my hopes were in this business visit because I wasn't very successful with my other business yet. Partly it was the fault of exactly this man, because he gave me hands full of work, including the preparation of his agenda, arranging contacts and meetings, hiring a car, including driver, and recreational planning. Thus I had to leave all other businesses for the meantime. Everything went smoothly, and I assured Ratinho, who was now getting a little bit impatient due to the costs for his calls and travel expenses he had invested for, that he would get his share once the coconut shell was rolling, which was our mandatory motto. The German was planning a trip to Natal, where the supplier of the coconut shell was located. I planned the flight, prepared everything for booking, asked Ratinho to search a hotel for us, and included him in the planning of the scheduled 2-day trip to Fortaleza, since it was very close to Natal. All in anticipation to finally meet my Ratinho personally. Of course, I wanted more than that. For his work, I wanted him to be rewarded, and planned to introduce him to the German, since this one was looking for someone with official Brazilian papers. Ratinho was exactly the right person for it. Even if I would have had to stay in the background, I would have loved to do so, but things turned out much differently than planned. I was gobsmacked when the supplier from Natal suddenly skipped the business one day before he was supposed to send the sample of 100 kilograms of coconut shell by raising the price by 100%. The German freaked out, threatened to cancel the trip altogether. I somersaulted to find a replacement and found it in Mary, the Colombian, who was very interested to do business with me. For the same price, she had the samples ready for shipment even in 2 days, while Brazilian suppliers needed a week for it. But since the price was based per ton, she realized now, surprised, that she earned absolutely nothing for the samples and had to pay her workers, who had worked in overtime to break the shell and pack it ready, out of her pocket. Since the German was under pressure because the competition was not asleep, of course, he was willing to pay almost any price, but unfortunately he stayed in Israel, and thus for me out of reach. I decided arbitrarily that she should charge $200 in addition for the workers. That's what she did, but as accurate as she was, she mentioned on the invoice that it was with my authorization. First, the Polish finance department asked whether those $200 were a commission for me. I explained quite clearly to the only employee of the company who spoke English, a Chinese man, that this was not the case, but that it was for the overtime pay of the workers. The young man seemed to have understood as such, apologized even for the false assumption. Thus, the case was settled for me, in contrary to the work of the preparation for the trip. The flight to Natal was obviously cancelled, and I had to make other plans now for these 2 days in Sao Paulo. It was impossible, of course, to make new contact, and I couldn't either, so I filled it with a day at the Brás, the large industrial area of Sao Paulo, and the 25th of Março, the road that drew close most buyers, mainly for electronic goods throughout the country and abroad. It attracted for very low prices, not only in relation of electronics. The second day I left open because something could always come up in a short time. Something else gave me quite another headache. Since I couldn't trust the German 100%, and my plans in respect of Moraes had thoroughly gone down the drain, I didn't need to calculate much to know that I would lose out financially to go back to Salvador to make my signature and come back to Sao Paulo. Additionally, paying the rent of 500 reais alone, especially since it wasn't long before Christmas, and there was no bus ride or flight below 1,000 reais if I waited any longer. Somewhere I had to make a decision, and quite fast. Thought and came to the conclusion that I could now perform my business quite well in Salvador. A computer I had now, remained only the problem with the internet access. This time I counted on my surrogate mom and Icaro, hoping that at least he would share the internet cable with me if I stayed with them for a while. I discussed everything with Julia, who agreed that it was better for me to return to Salvador. But I was not happy about it at all, would have much rather stayed in Sao Paulo. If it wasn't for this stupid signature, I was sure I could make it here, and felt very comfortable with Dona Vera. Also, I had long since renewed the contact with my old friends, only due to lack of time hadn't seen them yet. Even with Andrea, my old friend from Aruja, I was back in touch, by MSN and Orkut. I was happy here. This was my world, and not Salvador. Here I could eat what I wanted, and what I liked. In Salvador, there was little choice. It was always the same, and very expensive. Accordingly, I found it very difficult to prepare for the return journey. Julia helped me finding one of the very last cheap flights before Christmas on the internet, and paid with her credit card. But still, I had hope that the German would not only pay the bill for my translation services and support fees, but also emerged for my and Ratino's expenses, formed by numerous phone calls, and I might still manage somehow. Then the next shock. Ratino, who previously had done so much for me and had been very committed, was suddenly very reserved. At first he pretended to be very busy with his daily job, explained to me in details what he did exactly, but then I heard nothing from him for days. He called me no more, his Rainha, queen. I knew something was different. Finally, I wanted to know from him whether he was withdrawing. He honestly answered with yes. Ratinho, we are just getting started. You were so ambitious, but you can't expect that we become rich with the company immediately. Resigned, he replied that all the laws and rules of the import and export were simply too difficult for him. His world was the promotion, his job. If that's really what you want, then I have to accept it. But I asked you to leave me at least your name to continue on the website. You know that I'm not officially allowed to do this alone. Moraes had long since been banished from the site. Artinho assured me that it was not a problem. A few days later, though, shortly before the arrival of the German, I received an email with a short and concise, "Please remove name, dates, the photos of me, and the band and all contact information from the website." I was very upset and sad. Removed all the same day. Asked him whether we would at least stay friends, after he told me that he simply could not afford to have his name published in this form. Somewhere I understood him, as he pursued his own career and had shot some commercials already. I knew that he came in a conflict of interest. Of course we stay friends. This has nothing to do with our friendship. He assured me, and we stayed in contact, not as often and time-consuming as before, but he still showed interest in all the developments in my activities, and now we also talk frequently about private matters. I got the feeling that I had found in him a true friend. In any case, he should receive the money for what he did for me, and this I assured him he would.